Hello, everyone. Today, I will introduce you relevant knowledge about the operation and maintenance of high-voltage circuit breakers. Circuit breaker is an important device in high-voltage switchgear. Its function is to switch on or off when the high-voltage circuit is loaded, and when overload or short-circuit fault occurs. It can automatically cut off the circuit through relay protection. The arc extinguishing device can extinguish the arc in a very short time. There are many types of high-voltage circuit breakers, which can be divided into oil-filled, gas-filled, magnetic blowing, vacuum, etc., according to arc extinguishing and insulating medium conditions, and divided into less oil and more oil according to the amount of oil. The more oil circuit breaker uses oil to extinguish the arc and insulate the current-carrying parts from each other in the grounded tank. The less oil circuit breaker can only be used for arc extinguishing and not for insulation. Let's look at how to select and operate circuit breakers. 1. Selecting circuit breakers. First of all, we need to determine the installation site of circuit breakers as indoor or outdoor. Then, determine the arc extinguishing method, according to the nature of controlled load. Usually, for loads that require frequent operation, more oil, vacuum or magnetic blower circuit breakers can be used, while for loads that are not frequently operated, less oil circuit breakers can be used. At the same time, make sure that the rated voltage of the circuit breaker is consistent with the system voltage. The rated current of the circuit breaker is required to be slightly larger than the maximum long-term operating current of the load. The circuit breaker should have sufficient breaking capacity. When the line fails, the rated breaking current of the circuit breaker must be greater than the maximum short-circuit fault current at the worksite. If the requirements cannot be met, a reactor should be used to limit the short-circuit current, or use a current breaker with a larger capacity. A manual, electric, hydraulic, spring and mechanical coincidence, and other operating mechanisms and different operating power sources should be reasonably selected according to the load characteristics, protection requirements and remote control conditions. 2. Operating circuit breakers. Circuit breaker has a strong arc extinguishing ability, and can cut off the load current and short-circuit current. But accidents may occur due to the defects of the circuit breaker itself, or the improper use of the circuit breaker, and the most serious accident is the circuit breaker explosion. So, it is necessary to check a circuit breaker before powering it on. 1. Before powering on a circuit breaker, withdraw all issued work tickets, remove temporary grounding wire, inspect, and check the circuit breaker. 2. Check isolating switches on both sides of a circuit breaker are in the off position. 3. Use a 1000 to 2500 volts measure to measure the insulation resistance of the circuit breaker to meet the specified value. 4. 3 phases of the circuit breaker are all in off position, oil level and oil color are normal, and there is no oil leakage. 5. Indicators are all in off position. 6. Keep operating mechanism clean and complete and keep manual trip release mechanism flexible. 7. Check whether the relay protection and automatic device of a circuit breaker are in on position, so that the fault can be removed. 8. After careful inspection and confirmation, power on a circuit breaker for test to see if it acts accurately and flexibly, then put it into operation. Procedures for powering on. 1. Confirm that the circuit breaker is in the open state, according to the instructions of the opening and closing mechanical indicators. 2. If operating fuse cutout is not installed, close the disconnector on the power supply side, and then close the disconnector on the load side. 3. Install closing fuse cutout and operating fuse cutout. 4. After checking the name and number of the circuit breaker are correct, turn the operating handle 90 degrees clockwise to the preparing to close position. 5. When the green indicator light flashes, turn the operating handle clockwise by 45 degrees to the close position. After the hand is released from the operating handle, the handle will automatically return to 45 degrees counterclockwise. At this time, the green light is off and the red light is on, indicating the circuit breaker is powered on. Procedures for powering off. 1. After checking the name and number of the circuit breaker are correct, turn the operating handle by 90 degrees counterclockwise to the preparing to close position. 2. When the red light flashes, turn the operating handle counterclockwise by 45 degrees to the off position. After the hand is released from the operating handle, the handle will automatically return to 45 degrees clockwise. At this time, the red light is off and the green light is on, indicating that the circuit breaker is powered off. 3. Remove the closing fuse cutout and the operating fuse cutout. 4. Confirm the circuit breaker is in the open position, according to the indication of the opening and closing mechanical indicators. 5. Open the load side isolation switch first, and then open the power side isolation switch. Cautions on operation. 1. When pulling and closing switch, the action must be decisive and rapid. Pull the operating handle to the end position, so that the handle must move continuously from top to bottom. After confirming the circuit breaker is disconnected, the corresponding isolating switch can be opened. 2. When closing switch, observe the relevant indicating instruments. If the fault has not been eliminated, cut off the line immediately. 3. Whether the braking capacity can meet the requirements of the system depends on whether it is able to work normally, within the allowable range of the braking capacity. If the maximum short circuit capacity of the system exceeds the braking capacity, once a short circuit occurs, the circuit breaker may explode. Before the opening and closing operations, consider whether the braking capacity can meet the system requirements. If not, the short circuit capacity should be reduced. 4. When operating the isolating switch, confirm the circuit breaker has been disconnected, and the isolating switch can only be operated after the warning sign of "cannot be closed" is hung on the operating handle of the circuit breaker. 5. In the following cases, power off the operating power. A. When the circuit breaker is out of power for maintenance, or working on the relevant secondary circuit, and the automatic relay protection device circuit. B. When the operation of the circuit breaker is not in the main control room and power distribution room, and the operating power supply is disconnected, a warning sign of "do not close" must be hung on the operating handle of the circuit breaker. C. When the system wiring is switched from one set of bus bars to another set of bus bars. 6. Precautions for electric operation. A. The operating handle must be screwed to the end position, and at the same time, monitor whether the starting current value of the closing ammeter is within the normal range. B. When the closing indicator light is on, the handle can be returned to the middle position, and must not be returned too early, otherwise the brake will not be closed. C. When it is closed, the handle returns, and the closing ammeter indicates that it should return to 0, otherwise, the closing coil may be burned out, because the closing contactor cannot be opened. D. After the closing operation is completed, carefully check whether the transmission link of the mechanical opening and closing indicating device in the supporting porcelain bottle are in good condition, and there should be no abnormal noise at this time. Check the operating DC voltage at any time. When the power supply voltage is too low, the closing speed will be reduced due to insufficient closing power, which may cause explosion and major accidents that cannot be paralleled at the same time. 7. When the air pressure decreases, the arc extinguishing ability of the air circuit breaker will decrease, and it may cause an explosion when the circuit breaker is opened. Precautions for powering on the circuit breaker. 1. Before powering on, check whether the relay protection and automatic devices related to control are in the use position. In the event of an accident, the fault can be removed by correct action. 2. When closing, monitor the indications of the relevant meters, especially the voltmeter and ammeter. If there is any sign of an accident, it must be removed immediately. 3. After closing, check whether the current and voltage of each phase are balanced. If any abnormal phenomenon is found, it should be dealt with in time. The above is all for today. Thanks for your watching.